Members of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Worshipful Mayor of Chelmsford, Councillor Jude Deakin.
Good evening, members of the Council and members of the public. Welcome to this meeting. My chaplain, Father Tom Page, will open the meeting with prayers.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you'll be aware that recently it was the 25th anniversary of the massacre at Srebrenica, and so the prayer will reflect that. And of course, our hope is that our council will build a community which is strong and tolerant, and where such a terrible tragedy could never happen. God of truth and justice, we remember today the consequences of hatred in lives of brutally extinguished, in hearts torn apart, in memories scarred with pain. As we remember and honour the victims of hatred, lead us to sorrow over the sins of humanity. Draw close, we pray, to mothers and sisters, wives and grandmothers and all relatives and loved ones left behind, and heal the pain in their souls. Teach us, O Lord, to learn how to live for a world where differences are respected and valued, and where fear and mistrust can never overwhelm us, nor vengeance be stirred in our hearts. Give peace, we pray, to the people of Srebrenica, that their lives may be restored through your grace. Amen.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on our website. We're gradually getting used to this remote meeting, but sometimes technical problems do occur, so please bear with us if that happens during the meeting. A few reminders about the running of this meeting. Hopefully members of the council are taking part from a place where they will not be disturbed or distracted. When they are not actively participating in the meeting, I would ask that all members and officers keep their audio and video turned off. Any councillor or officer wishing to speak should type an H in the chat function, and I will call them when it's their turn to speak. Please remember to turn on your video first and then your audio when I call you to speak. Any councillor with an interest in any item on the agenda should declare it and keep their audio and video off when it's being considered. They will not be included in any vote on the subject. When it comes to a decision on any of the recommendations or motions before us, I will assume that if no one says that they oppose them, everyone will be in agreement. If anyone says that they are opposed, I will ask for a formal vote to be conducted. If we lose the live stream on website, I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes and hopefully the problem can be fixed. If it cannot, I will adjourn the meeting until a further date. We come to agenda item 1, and for the benefit of the public, we'll start by confirming who is present at the meeting. Mr. Mayfield, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Apart from those who have submitted apologies for absence, all members of the council appear to be present, with the exception of Councillors Chambers, Dayden, Dobson. Councillor Frascona, I know, is trying to join us, but she's having difficulty. Councillor Fuller, Councillor Gulliver, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hyland, Councillor Rajesh, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Roper, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Wright. If any of those have joined the meeting since I last checked, I apologise and will add them to the list of those present. The officers present are the Chief Executive, Nick Evely, the Legal and Democratic Services Manager, Lorraine Brown, and the Civil Services Manager, Catherine Ely. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have had apologies for absence for this meeting from councillors Ian Fuller, Eleanor Sampson and Malcolm Watson. Are there any others to report, and is that a correct record?
Councillor Shepherd is here.
Thank you.
Councillor Hyland is here.
Councillor Sampson's here.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Sampson.
Councillor Amber
Councillor
is here.
Davies here.
Okay.
Councillor Dobson's here.
Excellent.
Councillor
Okay.
Dobson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll go through the apologies for absence one more time. So we have councillors Ian Fuller and Malcolm. Did you say Malcolm Watson is here? No. Okay. So now we know that Councillor Sampson is here. So we have apologies from Councillor Fuller and Councillor Watson. And we don't have any others to report, I understand.
Just Councillor John, apparently, Madam Mayor.
Okay, sorry, Councillor John, thank you.
And Councillor Gulliver too, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other?
Madam Mayor, did you hear that Councillor Hyland was in attendance?
Yes, we're just doing apologies at the moment. So if there are no other apologies, we'll assume that everyone else is in attendance, and Mr. Mayfield will check the meeting list as to who is actually in attendance. Thank you for that. Okay, we're coming to Mayor's announcements. I have attended a number of virtual events, as many of you will be aware, and now the invitations for the face-to-face engagements are also coming in, which is a real pleasure, and we hope to do many more of those, obviously, as our year goes on. Just recently, I've attended in person the Wilderness Foundation, the Essex Dance Theatre, and paid a visit to the Keene Homes. The opportunities to fundraise for my charities is rather limited at present. However, we do have a quiz night next Thursday, the 30th of July, which will take place in the garden of the UB, United Brethren, to those that don't know otherwise. And it will also be online if you prefer. So you can find out about that on Facebook under Big Entertainment Quiz. And we hope you can join us, because it's very difficult to do fundraising at the moment, and this is a good fun way to do it. Okay, thanks for that. So we're now coming on to agenda item 3. Members will be aware of the need to declare any interest they have in the business at this meeting, either now or when we come to the item. Does anyone wish to declare an interest at this point? See no declarations of interest. Thank you. Agenda item 4. The minutes of the meeting on the 27th of May have been distributed. Are you happy to accept them as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. If there are no objections, then we'll say that is agreed, and the minutes of the meeting are approved. Agenda item 5 is public questions. Item 5, we have any member of the public giving their name and address may ask a question on this council, of which this council has power or duties, or which affect the city. Question does not exceed 2 minutes, and the total period allowed for question time under the council's rules of procedure is 30 minutes. We have just one question for this meeting from Andrew Thorpe Apps, who will put his question in person. Mr. Thorpe Apps, please. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. At last week's Policy Board meeting, the administration brought to the agenda the proposed master plan for the Warren Farm developments, with a recommendation of taking it to Cabinet for approval. However, at the meeting, 2 Cabinet members opposed parts of it, and 1 seconded an amendment that the plan be reviewed, and this was agreed. Does this not show that the administration is not backing their own local plan, which of course they recommended to full council back in May, and which states that the bus link must be included for the proposed developments at Warren Farm? Thank you.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Robinson is going to reply to this.
Thank you very much, Council and colleagues. Can I thank Mr. Thorpe for his question, because it gives me the opportunity to emphasise the Liberal Democrat group's commitment to genuine and comprehensive sustainability, and can also underline the full set of policy objectives that are in the local plan. Paragraph of the policy set says that opportunities for sustainable transport modes should be maximised to create neighbourhoods where alternative forms of transport to the private car, namely walking and cycling and public transport, are prioritised. And the Council Sustainable Transport-led Master Plan. The problem with this budget proposal is that it has become apparent in recent weeks that the proposal was inserted into the local plan without any detailed assessment of the full implications. And these have become more apparent recently. The word bus link sounds reasonable, but what it really means is a bus flyover at 2-metre height through a children's play area with a substantial impact on the immediate surroundings, both on the families side of the flyover, plus the traffic management on the estate, and the cutting down of a number of mature trees and hedges. To my mind, and that of my colleagues who proposed the amendment, it calls into doubt the word sustainable as a description. I mean, indeed, one might call the inclusion of the bus link not whitewash, but greenwash, the notion of sustainability. And this Lib Dem administration is not in the business of tokenism. We want to address the shortcomings of the plan designed by the previous administration. For example, its lack of emphasis on green energy. And there are a number of other areas where we are reviewing the sustainability of the plan. And that's why we concluded that there are significant doubts about the safety and benefits of the bus link. And we therefore referred all the sustainable transport elements for this development for further consideration. There is scope for other actions to substantially reduce traffic and increase cycling and walking, as well as public transport, and that's what we plan to do. And so I look forward to discussing this issue with Writtle and St Andrews Ward councillors, Writtle parish groups ahead. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. As there are no more questions, we will move on to the next business. Agenda item 6 is Cabinet question time. At the time of the deadline of noon on Monday, 2 questions have been submitted for Cabinet members. The first, Councillor Pooley. Councillor Pooley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet member for Greener and Safer Chelmsford please update us on progress during the past few months following the Council's declaration of a climate and ecological emergency and the accompanying action plan? In particular, we're interested in the progress that's being made in joining the community organisations that are interested in this project. The Council in that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening. And thank you, Councillor Pooley, for your question. You will recall, I'm sure, it's been just over a year since we declared a climate and ecological emergency. On the 6th, the City Council pledged to review its own practices and implement changes to address carbon emissions and boost biodiversity with a target of net zero carbon by 2030 within the City Council's own buildings and operations. Our electricity now comes from 100% renewable sources through our solar PV network, and since August last year, a renewable energy tariff with our electricity supplier. We're replacing lighting systems in buildings and car parks with LED and motion sensors, and we regularly review procurement policy. We're mindful of the effects of climate change, not only in Chelmsford, but for communities across the world that provide us with so many everyday products. They are on the front line of extreme weather and environmental collapse. I've said this before, local authorities should lead by example, and we are doing that. We have made progress across all areas of the Council and continued through the COVID-19 crisis thanks to the hard work of a team of officers tasked specifically rising to those challenges. So we're doing well, but we cannot act in isolation, as Councillor Pooley highlights, and one element of our action plan is fundamental to its success. creating opportunities for people, local organisations and businesses to get involved, to influence and to inspire innovation and cooperation in response to the key challenges identified in our climate and ecological emergency. So, in response to this, we are indeed reaching out. We are adapting the Love Your Chelmsford programme as the primary platform for engagement and in fostering community activities aligned to the Climate and Ecological Emergency Declaration. During lockdown, a briefing document on widening the scope of Love Your Chelmsford's programme was compiled and shared internally with essential elements of our action plan at its heart. Currently in development and now in an advanced stage of design, the Love Your Chelmsford website will provide the central point of reference for all matters relating to the Climate Emergency and Ecological Emergency Declaration and Action Plan. It's an interface for people and organisations wishing to connect with us to address the climate and ecological emergency. The Love Your Chelmsford Volunteers programme has been quietly championing environmental initiatives for over 20 years. You may already have had the opportunity yourselves to be part of this, whether donning the high-vis tabard and wielding a litter picker, tending our parks and green spaces, whatever the weather, or one of the thousands involved in our mass tree planting programme from November 2019 to March 2020, when we saw huge numbers of volunteers of all ages gather at Highlands for the season finale, creating new woodland habitat, both there and across the city and wider district. So, if not yet, your eyes were about to be open to the wonderful work undertaken by our teams of officers and volunteer leaders, previously championing community engagement through litter picks, ideas for waste reduction, recycling and schools visits. Now, a dedicated Love Your Chelmsford website will reflect our action plan and the ethos to reduce, reuse, recycle and rethink. We're focusing on the ways we can all address climate change and biodiversity loss, championing our local green space, inviting people to engage with nature, whatever the season, and changing our behaviour for the better, with ideas for educators and ideas for rainy days, recycle crafting and green living. Just this afternoon, I had the privilege of viewing the site in progress, and I am so excited for you to see this when it launches later this summer. I'm proud that we're no longer whispering about or pondering the relevance of the climate crisis. We are taking action. We don't have time for whispers, and we need to shout from the rooftops so that others do the same and do it now. We cannot move forward knowing that what we do about biodiversity loss without protecting and enhancing wild habitats that we are still fortunate enough to have around us, and by finding ways of creating new ones through the Pollinator Project, Living Landscapes initiatives, and of course through our own council activities. Developers now have guidance to hand in the form of supplementary planning documents and the LiveWell accreditation scheme. This outlines clearly a way forward that will not only future-proof development, but vitally restore so much of the natural world on our doorstep that we had taken for granted, or worse, felt was dispensable for the sake of growing the city. Another ambition, and is coming a reality, is to host a climate summit later this year. Through the creation of a climate change partnership in Chelmsford, we want to broaden our scope to engage with partners, other agencies and the wider community. We aspire for the whole Chelmsford area to be net zero carbon, ideally by 2030. This was originally planned for March 2020, but was unavoidably delayed. Plans are now underway for a series of climate summit events to be hosted, either online with virtual breakout rooms, workshops and keynote speakers, or in situ at the Civic Centre through October 2020. A meeting with officers last month laid the foundations with this. We aim to launch the concept in August to start raising awareness and invite people to sign up to a mailing list for regular updates and a schedule of events. We need to consider our legacy and how we take these partnerships forward. Clearly, we would wish to empower businesses, communities and community leaders to do this, supported by us as a council. We have already made connections with a number of inspiring leaders in transition engineering practice, business, environmental and community hubs, who approached us following last year's declaration. Finally, I am very happy to announce our plans for the role of a climate ambassador, a new role, someone who is a councillor who will work closely with me as Cabinet Member for Greener and Safer Chelmsford and the Love Your Chelmsford team to maintain links with parishes, community groups, schools and local businesses. The role of our Green Climate Ambassador will facilitate progress towards the goal beyond the Council's operations by engaging with the wider community. They will work with the Love Your Chelmsford team, relevant officers and myself and work towards the Climate Summit. They will liaise with CVS, the volunteer service group locally who has done so much through the crisis and engages volunteers constantly. Also with the Woodland Trust. They will be a point of contact for our parish councils, community and faith groups, presenting talks to schools and community groups about the climate crisis and how we all have a role to play. They will also, we hope, approach housing associations to discuss communal green spaces in housing areas and to investigate the potential for wildflower areas, trees and community orchards and edible landscapes in and around Chelmsford and the surrounding area. They will also present talks and make short films to be promoted through Love Your Chelmsford and, importantly, attend the local democracy and community engagement working group meetings, working with Councillor Natasha Dudley to spread the word about our initiatives. I am delighted to nominate Councillor Tom Willis to this role. His passion for the environment and his deep awareness of the harm we've done to the planet is evident, and it is always moving to hear his wisdom. It would be an honour to work alongside him. I understand that he served on the council between 2007 and 2011 in a subgroup overseeing the planning of the Oaklands Museum extension. Councillor Willis at the time proposed the inclusion of green features. As a result, ground source heat pumps were installed and, as I understand it, continue to function to this day. So he is indeed ahead of his time and would be a very welcome addition to our team. I hope this outlines some of the progress that we're making and in how we are now establishing connections outside of the council. Thank you, Councillor Pooley.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Our next question, I believe, is from Councillor Frascona.
Good evening. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Connected Chelmsford how the Council has been communicating with the public during the coronavirus emergency.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Marie Goldman, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Frascona, for that question. I'm really pleased to get that question actually, because it does give me an opportunity to say a big thank you to all of the officers at the council who have been working, in all departments in unprecedented times and working extremely hard. But as the Cabinet Member for Connected Chelmsford, I particularly want to thank the hard work that's gone in that directorate. And in particular with the communications team, the comms team, who have been doing a phenomenal job over the last few months. They do a great job anyway, obviously, but over the last few months, they have worked their socks off. And I've taken the liberty to compile a list of just some of the things that they've been up to over the last few months, which I hope will give you a flavour of the extra stuff that they've been doing. I'd like to actually start off with something that's slightly outside the comms team, but it kind of forms part of that, which is our customer service centre, which has remained fully open throughout this whole crisis. And you might think that's perfectly normal, and of course we see it as perfectly normal. That's exactly what should have happened. But there are plenty of councils around the country, and actually fairly locally as well, which have not had their customer service centres open. I think some of them even now remain closed, or at least not up to full strength. So I'd like to say thank you to all the people who have been answering the phones, taking questions from the public and providing that really valued information. With apologies to the bike that's going past my house at that very inopportune moment. But there have been plenty of other things that we've been doing as well. Just a quick rundown of some of them. So, the comms team have been issuing numerous proactive news releases about temporary closures, business grants, our financial situation, and now with our facilities reopening, like Riverside, for example, you know, a comms plan around that, keeping the public informed about what is happening. It shouldn't be underestimated just how difficult it is to kind of keep on top of that, especially with so many changes coming forward from government that we learn about at the same time as the rest of the public, actually, a lot of the time. So we have to put together a comms plan very quickly and make sure we're communicating the right information as quickly as we possibly can do. We've kept the public updated throughout lockdown using social media, using community Facebook groups, as well as our own Chelmsford City Council Facebook, Twitter and Instagram channels. And they've had extremely high engagement rates as well, which is great to see, because that means that we are, you know, getting to reach the people that that are interested in our message, and it is being seen. We held the council's first ever online informal cabinet Q&A to combat misinformation and to help residents with questions and fears around coronavirus. That was kind of back in the days, beginning of kind of April, I think that was. And that was the first time we'd ever done that, first time the council had ever held an informal Q&A session like that, which was specifically directed just at questions from the public, because we have these formal full council meetings, even formal cabinet meetings, and they're great, and we discuss specific topics, but often there isn't enough time for all of the questions from the members of the public about kind of more general matters. And so to hold those Q&A where we were genuinely taking questions from the public all the time, and getting to grips with what interests the public and what they want answers for, that was really important. And in fact, it worked so well the first time that we did it again last night, and actually got a really good response. And I think that's something that we would very much like to do, continue doing going forward as well. We've produced our first ever animated videos in-house. The comms team have learned new skills. They've never done that before, but they produced an in-house video. It was the first one talking about the council's financial position. Not the most cheery of subjects, it has to be said, but there have been other videos that have now been produced off the back of that, and it's great to see the council and staff moving into the 21st century with that kind of technology. We've created a We Are Here campaign, which was to highlight the work being done by key workers and people redeployed to work on the community hub, and the and CVS staff, which ran on social media from the 6th to the 18th of May. We've supported and promoted the first ever live broadcast of council meetings, like this one right now, which is being broadcast onto social media, and that's brilliant, because it really does increase public engagement, and communication are so key at any time, but in particular at times of crisis, just as we're going through now. So I'm very pleased to see that happening and working very, very well. And thanks to all members for being such willing participants in that. Again, it's not something that's being done necessarily in every council around the country. Lots of councils are not having lots of meetings, whereas we are, and we're getting on with the business we're getting on with council business, as the public, I think, would expect. So thank you very much to everybody who's taking part in that. We've produced a leaflet with key service information and hotline numbers for residents, which was sent to every household in Chelmsford at the beginning of lockdown. I think Royal Mail distributed that to the electoral register of about 78,000 households. We have weekly e-bulletins to residents with key information about service changes, national guidance, and guidance for staying safe when visiting various venues and areas in the city. And these had an extremely high open rate, actually. The highest was about 65%, but an average of 56% across the 10 e-shots to date, which is fantastic, really. The average open rate for e-shots is normally around 40%, so we've definitely seen an increase in that, which is brilliant to see. We produced a summer edition of City Life, which was providing information and reassurance to every household in Chelmsford, and that Royal Mail door dropped that to 84,000 households. We filmed, edited and produced and promoted a virtual VE Day ceremony. Again, this was a first. We've never done this before. And it was really popular. It was a real morale booster for the city during lockdown. It had 8,000 views on Facebook, 62 shares, 564 likes on Facebook as well, which is great. The comms team have assisted and promoted videos from both myself and from the leader of the council, Councillor Robinson, to residents to keep them informed, to encourage social distancing and to reassure the public that the council is doing all it can to protect residents and businesses from the virus and the financial effects of lockdown. And we've used our social media channels to support information campaigns from other bodies, from national bodies such as the NHS and Public Health England, as well as the police and our colleagues at the County Council as well. The communications team, excuse me, the communications team has responded to every comment that we've seen on our videos, particularly on the budget shortfall animation. They've been addressing any myths and misinformation that might be circulating, while also assisting residents with concerns or queries. And then finally, for now, we sent out a mailing to 150 of Chelmsford's independent convenience stores with social distancing posters. So much of that that stuff that I've just mentioned is an extension of what we would do in normal times, but goes far above and beyond what we would normally do. So again, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Councillor Frascona for asking the question and for allowing me the opportunity to say a big thank you to the comms team and to all council staff who have worked so hard during this crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're moving on now to agenda item 7. The next 3 reports are from Cabinet on the 8th of July and will be introduced by Councillor Chris Davidson. The first is on the Capital Programme update and outturn for 2019-20. Councillor Davidson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As regards the paper on the Capital Programme, there were some detailed approvals that were made at Cabinet, which means that Council can focus on the big picture. And there are simply 4 points that we are asked to note, and I'll explain those. First of all, though, can I just say that the capital programme has 2 components to it. The first is the larger schemes, the really significant capital developments, and the second one is the asset replacement programme, in which we replace the larger items of equipment like refuse collection lorries and so on. As regards the larger works, Appendix 1 shows the latest proposed budgets, and that totals just under £145 million. So the paper asks Council to note this figure, which is explained in paragraph 3.1. On the asset replacement programme, the paper asks Council to note the outturn for last year and the budget for this year, and these are set out in Appendix 3. And lastly, the paper asks Council to note how the capital expenditure for last year was funded, and this is set out in paragraph 5 of the paper. So in a moment, I'll ask whether there's any questions on any of that. I think it's worth, before I do so, just noting a couple of points. We've made some savings through both reduced costs, for example, getting a better price, and rephasing of expenditure. So, for example, replacing assets later. And those cost reductions are worth over £200,000. The rephasing means that our plans have shifted £20 million from the overall capital programme for the current year, 2020-21, into future years. It's worth noting that now, as it's relevant to the discussion we may have when we come to the medium-term financial strategy on paper 7.3, but that does come out, at least to some extent, of this paper. So I'll hand back, Madam Mayor, to you to see whether there's any questions on this paper.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions on this? If so, if you wish to ask an H in the chat meeting. No, I don't think we have any, we don't appear to have any questions. So the recommendations, oh, hold on, we've got Councillor Whitehead has just come in. Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, hello, thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Davidson. The one query I think that we looked at was, I'm afraid to say, the trees and the tree planting, a subject that I see featured in the Chronicle earlier this week. You still have in the budget some £4 million for planting trees, and whilst we don't disagree with the principle of it, surely at a time of COVID, where we should be saving our money. This is something that should be deferred and not put in still. I mean, there are other programs on there which are ones which I could comment on homelessness and rough sleepers, where the government appears to be helping us all out, which is good news. But in particular, we have seen that the initial planting of trees didn't turn out well. I know that the cabinet member made a long response to that recently, but nonetheless, planting lots of trees in Southwood and Ferrers and getting bad pictures in the Chronicle because they've not been watered is not a good way of this council showing its green credentials. Doing this is a long-term project, and postponing it for a short period, I think, would be a sensible thing to do to make sure that money is in reserves for some of the other things that we're enabling ourselves to do in this emergency. And as I say, it's quite the opposite to be anti-green, but nonetheless, clearly members of the public have come up. I know that lots of questions were raised in South Woodham about it, and they are seeing evidence of money being wasted. Now, I'm told 65% of the trees are okay. Others tell me 65% of them are not okay, and I don't know because I haven't been down to see it. But I know Councillor Massey is discussing it with the cabinet member. So could we perhaps have a moratorium on that particular item to make sure that money is available elsewhere? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
The tree planting is obviously very important to us. We declared a climate and ecological emergency last year. The £4.4 million that's in the budget is not for trees. It's to purchase land on which we would put trees, I believe. We clearly have to have somewhere to plant the large number of trees. Some of them are to be placed in existing locations, but we have set aside money in the capital budget to enable us to purchase land if we need to. I think Councillor Moore would like to come in, but can I just say, in terms of your plea for a moratorium, we are here in July 2020 with a medium-term financial strategy looking a significant distance ahead. We will be coming back in the autumn with an update on this. None of the expenditure that we're talking about here is going to be incurred before 21-22. And I was just trying to find within the papers for 7.3 exactly when we're planning to spend that money. But it's a distance ahead. So we can come back and talk about this in the autumn. In the meantime, I don't think we should be putting in moratoriums. I think we should be accepting that we do need to plant trees. But I'm going to hand over, Madam Mayor, if you're happy, to Councillor Moore.
Yes, I'm going to call Councillor Moore. I've seen that she wishes to participate. Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Many thanks, Madam Mayor and Councillor Davison. Indeed, I would like to respond to you, Councillor Whitehead, and indeed the Conservative group. I don't believe that the Conservative group has taken this crisis seriously. You were asked on repeated occasions whether you would declare a climate and ecological emergency. You refused. Essex has acknowledged it as a county council, but still refuses to declare that there's a problem and refers to climate change, not climate crisis. Essex County Council is desperately looking for land on which to plant trees at the moment, and they have a very steep learning curve because they haven't managed anywhere near as much as we have in proportion. The site at South Woodham is being visited tomorrow by Councillor Massey, accompanied by me and the Manager of Parks and Green Spaces, and indeed Councillor Sismy. I was concerned to see pictures of this. I would like to check the area for myself. I take the advice of officers. I trust them. I trusted them when they proposed the scheme. The hay meadow there was not wildflower meadow, but it was hay meadow that was mowed in June and left for the rest of the summer. It was short, it was cut short, and so the arguments that hay meadow sustains environment as much as trees simply isn't the case. We've also seen unprecedented dry weather, as I'm sure you'll know, and you may even understand that that's a result of climate change and the extreme weather systems that we're experiencing. Trees contribute positively to combat air pollution, and I know that particulates in the air are a particular cause of lung conditions which can exacerbate COVID-19. Everything is interconnected. And as Councillor Davison spoke so candidly, this money is set aside for the possibility of finding new land. We hope that by increasing our connection with other private landowners outside of the council, several of whom have come forward already to express their interest in dedicating land for tree planting activity and in the use and championing of our volunteer services, that will really reduce the amount of cost involved in this. And I hope you'll agree that investing in our future, investing in future generations is worth the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I've got Councillor Sisney and Councillor Willis both wishing to speak. Councillor Sisney, would you like to come in?
Yes, I fully support the planting of trees. I'm a great believer in a green countryside and lots of trees. But if the council is going to plant trees, it's going to spend the taxpayers' money in planting trees. It must do so in a way that they can be supported and sustained so that they grow and support the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Sisney. Councillor Willis, would you like to come in?
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's quite shocking that those of us who've been involved in the running of this council in the last 20 years have to have our attention drawn to the need to prioritise these matters by a Swedish schoolgirl. But can I remind you of the famous phrase that she used? When your house is burning down, it's time to panic a bit. This is not a time to stop doing what we should have been doing for years. It's a time to press on and try to make up some of the lost ground. And I think it's most important that we stick to that. I know it's difficult, but this is not the place to start looking for economies.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Willis. Can I remind all members, please, if you've put your hand up, remember to take it down again. It doesn't automatically go down just because you've spoken. You do actually have to put it down yourself. Lovely, thank you. Okay, well, that was a very interesting debate. So we're still on agenda item 7.1, and I'm asking, are the recommendations in the report agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I've just realised I've got Councillor Pooley has his hand up. Councillor Pooley, was it 7.1 you wish to speak on?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I don't wish to disagree with the recommendations at all. I just wanted to refer to another aspect of the budget that was referred to earlier on. That remains a very high priority of the council, clearly, in relation to homelessness and rough sleeping and affordable housing. So it's pleasing to me that those elements of the council strategy are continuing to develop and unfold. Councillor Whitehead is quite correct that the government is coming rather late in the day to realise the extent of the investment which is necessary if we're going to solve both the homelessness issues and also the genuine undersupply of affordable housing. And to reassure Councillor Whitehead and other councillors, I'm very, very aware that officers have been working very hard indeed over recent days and will be in the few days to come, together with our key partners in the community, in order to respond to that government invitation to bid for the latest round of potential capital and revenue support. I realise that looking at capital expenditure can often have revenue implications, and I sympathise with Councillor Davidson and his finance colleagues among the officer community in looking at those implications. But it is really important that we drive these aspects of our policy forward at a time when the need has been highlighted and increased by COVID-19. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. I was about to move on to agenda item 7.2, but I see that Councillor Ian Wright has now got his hand up. Councillor Wright, did you want to speak on 7.1?
Yes, very briefly. A moment ago, I did hear a few voices saying agreed, but that really is not satisfactory. I would like to know who actually would support or not support. This is an important subject. So could we have a clear vote on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. I am just going to take some advice on what is required in order to have you wish to have a named vote on this, Councillor Wright?
Yes, please. I'd like to know who supports and who is against and also who abstains. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wright. If you will bear with me one moment, please, members. I'm just about to take some advice on how we proceed with this. Councillor Dayden, I see you have your hand up. I will be with you in a moment. Thank you. Apologies for the delay. I'm afraid we're using various types of media here to talk to each other. So. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to take a roll call. So we're going to ask Mr. Mayfield to take a roll call. Mr. Mayfield, if you would ask members how they wish to vote on 7.1. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I'll read out your names in alphabetical order. If you could indicate whether you're for or against the recommendation in 7.1 or wish to abstain. So, Councillor.
Sorry, can I just check and clarify something? The recommendation is that the Council note.
Precisely. What are we voting on?
What does voting against noting mean?
Thank you. Yes.
Mayor, on a point of order, please. We're discussing something. We're discussing something that was last year, right? Councillor Whitehead has picked up on something that's in the figures that we're voting on now. If we're voting on something that says, shall we continue planting the trees, that has to be a separate agenda item. It's not related to the programme for last year.
Okay, thank you for that input, please, Councillor Park. So we're going to go to Councillor Dayden, who did also have a hand up and wish to speak on 7.1.
Good evening, thank you, Madam Chair. It was along the similar lines, actually, that if we are going to vote on it, I don't, I do support the planting of trees, but I think there's probably avenues that we could do to partner people to reduce that cost. As I've kind of been pro eco sites for burials, which I think would fit quite well with the state of the world right now. But yeah, I think there's ways that we could partner people and do it a lot cheaper and still achieve the good objective of planting trees. So I would welcome a debate on it if we're going to vote, actually.
Thank you. I don't think we're actually at that point in this meeting to be debating on the trees, because that is one small aspect. Obviously, this is an outturn report, so, there probably genuinely is nothing to be voting on other than those that wish to note it and those that wish to, obviously, not to note it. Councillor Ian Wright, are you wishing to come back, or have you not put your hand up? Thank you. I think you didn't put your hand down.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, obviously I'm not happy that people just muttered agreed when a lot of people wouldn't agree, but I will withdraw my request for a vote because I think my concerns have been noted. So I do withdraw that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wright. They definitely have been noted. Okay, so I did ask if the recommendation of the report was agreed. I did have a response. So we are now moving on to 7.2, which is the Treasury Management outturn for 2019-20. Councillor Davidson again, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Treasury Management outturn report is at the appendix starting on page 4 in the paper. This has been discussed in some detail at the Treasury Management and Investment Subcommittee, and it's also been through Cabinet where there were no questions. Council to endorse the report. Given that background or history at least to it, I won't go through the paper. It does contain a full account of the way in which the council managed its treasury operations last year.
Councillor Davidson, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have had Councillor Robinson who has a point of order, which I should have taken before I asked you to speak. My apologies.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Can I suggest, I know you read out guidance at the beginning, can I try and help you and emphasise that to all members of the council? Can I suggest that if you want to speak, you put an early message in the chat box, but you say what item you want to speak on, then the Mayor will get you to speak on, and that everybody should prepare to speak on an item and not suddenly decide that they want to speak when the Cabinet member is moving their winding up speech. Councillor Davison twice asked if anybody got any questions. There was silence for 30 seconds. So can I please encourage all members of the council to put an H with the item number in the chat box and then speak and address their comments to the recommendation rather than the item that they wish was on the agenda. And we had a question time earlier when members could have asked questions on absolutely any topic, and I and the rest of the Cabinet would have been happy to answer any question that members had, but only 2 members of the council did submit questions. So I want to be clear, this administration wants to be open and transparent and answer questions on any topic, but the time to do that was earlier on the agenda. And for now, we should be sticking to the items that are on the agenda, and I hope that all members of the council will cooperate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Paul Clark wishes to come in on this.
Thank you, Mayor. On that point precisely, I didn't want to ask a question on what Councillor Davidson was saying, and I didn't want to ask a question on the capital programme 7.1. The reason I said point of order was it sounded like we were about to vote on whether we agreed with planting trees, which was part of the programme last year. And I was merely making the point, which if I'd waited until after you'd taken the vote and everyone had said agreed, you would have said, we've already done that. And I cannot read people's minds to know that Councillor Whitehead was about to say what he did. So that's why I asked at the time. I don't need to be corrected on a point of order by the leader of the council on something I already know, but I had to interject because I didn't have a chance.
Okay, well,
I thank you for your explanation, Councillor Clark. Yes, I agree with you. Thank you. I was more, if anything, I was commenting on the way Councillor Wright had approached the subject, and I'm grateful to Councillor Clark for his intervention because I agree with him, and nothing I said was a comment on what Councillor Clark said. It was more the way Councillor Whitehead had gone off topic and then Councillor Wright continued it. But thank you. Sorry.
I think we have to move on now. We've spent enough time on this. It has been agreed, and we are now trying to get onto agenda item 7.2.
Madam Mayor, can I come back to you?
I didn't see you. Thank you.
I have raised my hand. And it's all very well. It's all very well the leader of the council coming out with words that he's just said, but unfortunately, at times there are issues regarding this technology, and unfortunately, I couldn't hear his opening address to this council, so therefore I had no clue what he was on about, and I'm not prepared to accept criticism from him or anybody else when I was not aware of what was said. I think that message was totally unnecessary. I was just concerned about that issue. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think we're going to take this offline now. If there is any further debate on 7.1 or the issues that were raised within it, can we please take this offline? And we are now moving on. Can I go back to Councillor Davidson, please, so he can finish his report on 7.2? Thank you.
There wasn't a lot to finish off, because I was simply going to say that I won't go through the paper. It contains a full account of the way in which the council managed its treasury operations last year. It is the third time this paper has been available for discussion in different fora. So I shall simply invite the council to endorse the paper. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you. We have Councillor Hyde wishing to ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The recommendation or the resolution asks us to note 7.2 and then recommend to endorse it. Which is it?
The recommendation is to note. That's the information I have.
So why do we have both note and endorse?
I would have to ask Mr. Mayfield that question. I'm afraid I don't have that detail in front of me at the moment.
Madam Mayor, the recommendation should in fact be to note the outturn figures for 2019-20. So the endorse is superfluous, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for your advice. Thank you. So we are asked to, just to clarify, we are asked to note. Councillor Ian Wright, do you wish to come back in? Your hand is still up.
My apologies, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so members, we are asked to note this. Are we in agreement? Have we noted this?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. So we're moving on to agenda item 7.3. The final report from the Cabinet is on the medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Davidson will take us through this now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to start by saying that this paper addresses the most important issue that Chelmsford City Council currently faces. But maybe I should say this is not the most cheery of subjects that Councillor Goldman referred to earlier. We have a forecast which shows a serious funding challenge. COVID-19 has caused major impacts across the economy, and the City Council is not exempt from that. The purpose tonight is to agree the strategy to guide how we respond. There are always uncertainties to be navigated and a budget gap to be closed at this stage in the budget setting process. But this year the uncertainty is far greater and the budget gap potentially far larger than normal. So caution is needed in interpreting the numbers that are set out in the paper, because the one thing I think we can be clear on is that those numbers are going to change over the next few months. If I can just say something about the financial context. COVID-19 and lockdown have had a very serious impact on our finances. Extra support for residents in response creates extra costs. A community hub, taking rough sleepers off the streets, administering grant schemes, maintaining essential services. We're not apologising. In fact, we're very proud of how we've responded, but those things all cost extra. It's the reduced income, though, that has had the most financial impact. 70% of services are funded by income from car parks, from leisure centres, from theatres, from events at Highlands, from the income we generate from the cash we hold and from the land investments we have. And all of those sources of income are down. As Councillor Goldman mentioned, we released a video to explain this. It forecast an £8.6 million shortfall this year, and that figure quickly became out of date. So what about government support then? The level of financial support for local government is a critical factor in how we respond to this. And the government finally announced a further package of support earlier this month. We didn't have the details when this paper went to Cabinet 2 weeks ago, and we still can't say how much more funding we're going to receive. One part of the package was 500 million extra for local authorities, and Chelmsford's share of this is £250,000, and that's very welcome, but that's not going to fill the gap we face. The other part of the package is to reimburse lost income during the pandemic. We've now seen the principles, but we still don't know how much this will give us in cash terms. A rough estimate is around 5 million, give or take £1 million. And the support is for this year only, ignoring the likelihood that it will take longer for our income to recover. So however this works out, it's already clear that this extra government funding will fall well short of closing the gap caused by COVID-19. So at best, it's one cheer for the government, no more than that. So the forecast. Well, forecasting the finances over the next 5 years is almost impossible in the current circumstances. The figures will change again several times. But despite difficulties, we still need to make plans to mitigate the financial risk to the council. The starting point is clarity about the scale of the challenge, and I hope the paper, particularly the chart at paragraph 2.6, helps illustrate the challenge. We've shown 3 possible scenarios with low, medium or high shortfalls, as it would be misleading to try to pick just one forecast. So what about our response then? Well, initially, we will use available reserves to cover the costs of COVID-19. But as the effect is so large, we need to top up the reserves by reallocating the contributions to capital that we had budgeted. We propose to remove these from the revenue budgets for last year, 2019-20, and this year, 2020-21. That's the only way to ensure the reserves are sufficient to respond to the COVID-19 shock. This has a lasting effect on our revenue budgets, which will need to pick up MRP, as it's called. That's the cost of replacing capital, the minimum revenue provision. So the contributions to capital sums we reallocate from last year and this will come back as revenue costs over future years. The other effect of a generally worsened outlook is that we will deplete our cash more quickly and more than originally forecast. That will require increased internal borrowing and reduce income from investments. And as we discussed at Cabinet, the interest effect is relatively small as interest rates are so low, but the MRP effect is larger as the capital we deploy must be replenished by revenue adjustments over the life of the asset that's acquired. But that's enough of the technical detail. What about the strategy then? The strategic response to the challenges I've just set out requires a series of measures to ensure that we're able to prepare balanced budgets for 21-22 and later years. These measures are set out in section 8 of the paper, and I won't read them out. We've already begun taking short-term measures as set out in paragraph 8.2, and we've refreshed and strengthened the existing strategy. So in summary then, there's a very significant financial challenge for this council. The forecast revenue gap for 2021-22 set out in the paper is certainly one of the largest, is probably the largest the council has ever seen. A significant gap will remain even after the extra funding that the government has announced recently, but the size of that gap remains uncertain. The best forecasts today will inevitably prove wrong, so what we need is a strategy to enable us to navigate through these uncertainties and deliver a balanced budget for 2021-22 in 6 months' time. And that's what this paper sets out. So I'm happy to take questions before I ask Council to approve the 4 items that are set out there, which is the medium-term financial strategy, the way we're using reserves, which are set out in section 7 and appendix 4, the capital strategy in appendix 3, which is potentially where Councillor Whitehead can come back and say something about trees, and the guidelines for preparing next year's budget, which are set out at Appendix 5.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Clark, I have you with your hand up.
I think Councillor Whitehead was just prior to me, but I know he hasn't put. I will not speak now if you wish.
Okay.
Right, okay, Mayor, I'll speak now and Councillor Wade can follow if he wishes. I didn't say anything about this before. I think the sort of Goldilocks scenario of sort of small, medium or large deficit, I think you have to err on the side of caution and say this is going to be significant. And if the rate of business failure that we see every day is anything to go by, we are going to be looking at something worse than we're looking at now. One of the issues I have as a member on committees such as the Treasury Management Subcommittee or the Audit is we don't have, as an opposition group, access to the information that would give us a sort of a full coverage of what we're being taken through in this report. Yeah, the report is informative, but then it's not, and it's worse than it was then. But the point about this is I struggle to get it, and it's at the fingertips of the likes of Councillor Davidson, so it's all one-sided. And I would just add that I'm being asked to comment on something which January 19, Councillor Davidson stood up as a member of the public then and criticised the current the administration then on the amount of exposure they had to commercial property and what the consequences were if we had a downturn. Well, we had the downturn. Councillor Davidson has been in that position since May 2019, and you've done nothing about it. So what I'm saying is this situation could have been less than it is now. It's dreadful. It could have been less dreadful than it was. And what we get to see is we've just watched a car crash happen before us. And when I ask what the damage is, I get shown one side of the car that has a few dents in it. But when I go around the other side, I find out that the whole of the car's been caved in. But I would have liked to have seen that scenario up front and not have to keep asking officers for information to make comments on reports like this. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Whitehead, would you like to come in?
Would it be easier if Councillor Davison responds to that part first, I think?
I think he can respond to both you and Councillor Clark at the same time.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't mention anything to do with wood or ecological items the second time. Never fear. I have great sympathy with all of you and Councillor Davison in particular by being faced with things that we can't plan ahead properly. It's impossible to do so, really. We're talking about what happened in the last 3 months, which astounds us all and continues to astound us, really. So one could go on forever picking items here, there and everywhere, but we have no intention of doing so. I'm sorry, Councillor Watson isn't here this evening. He had to go for an urgent MRI today, and therefore he had prepared some comments, but not of any particular substance of criticism, really. It is not our belief that we should be criticising at this time. We hope the government will fill in the missing monies, or 75% of the missing monies of our revenue costs. Our strengths were that we had external revenue, and that was the strength of this council. As in life, all strengths turn to weaknesses if you're not careful, and we are currently then proving the opposite to what we had before. So councils that had no external income are getting money from government, and councils with it are going to get hopefully 75%. But I think we'll all be here in 2 or 3 months' time with entirely different figures, hopefully ones that Councillor Clark will be happy with. I won't go into the subject of commercial properties and things. I know it's a subject that he is concerned about, and that's for Councillor Davison to answer. But we support what's going through this evening, really. It is not something that I think any of us can envisage being the same, but nonetheless, to start making individual comments at this stage would actually be counterproductive, so that we are happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Chris Davidson, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm grateful to Councillor Whitehead for the support and sympathy, I think, were the words he used. So, yes, I have to come back on what Councillor Clark said. First of all, he said we're facing a significant deficit. I agree with that. the way I set it out, I indicated we are facing a significant deficit. And I don't understand the car crash analogy. I think we have set out very clearly that the car faces a significant amount of repair because there are going to be dents on all sides of it. The proposition that I should have acted at some point earlier, the question I asked the previous administration was why there were so many eggs in the retail basket, to which Councillor Whitehead's response at the time was, well, that's because of High Chelmer. We have a significant amount of income we derive from the land interest we have in High Chelmer. That's a good thing. It's unfortunate that that is likely to fall. There's not much we can do about that, it has to be said. We have, though, been reducing our interests in retail over our other interests in retail over the last year. As regards access to information, I'm also quite disappointed because I've been very happy to speak to Councillor Clark, as I have done with both opposition parties equally, in advance of these meetings, to help provide to him any information that he would like to have to enable him to understand the figures better. If he'd asked questions at Cabinet, then we would have had the opportunity either to answer them then or to answer them in the last 2 weeks since Cabinet. So keeping powder dry is one thing, but I don't think it helps with the transparency that we are committed to providing if he wishes to ask for it. Having responded to those points, I'll now simply invite Council to agree the recommendation.
Okay, I do need a seconder for this. Is someone able to second this?
Seconded.
Thank you. So are the recommendations in the report agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the annual report of the Audit Committee for 2019-2020, which will be introduced by Councillor Nora Walsh. Councillor Walsh.
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. The Audit and Risk Committee recently agreed its annual report, which full council are tonight asked to approve for publication. The annual report details various areas, including its work programme for the years 2019 to 2020, the terms of reference, the audit charter, and the future work for 2020 to 2021. During the previous year, 2019 to 2020, the committee met 4 times, considering matters including the digital transformation programme, strategic housing, updates from the external auditors, and the internal audit plan. As with other committees, it has recently been meeting remotely, with the external auditors joining our committee meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions and then recommend that the Council approves this annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Paul Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. The other H was for the subject that we've already just passed on. In item 8, 2.1, it mentions the Audit and Risk Committee does not have any independent members, but because it's in relation to the previous sentence which says county elections, I would like that change to indicate that it's not a case of independent councillors that are members of the committee, because obviously that's me. I just think it's a little bit misleading and could have been worded better.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clark. I think that had been earlier noted on an email by you, and
we haven't changed
Yes, I think the agreement was to update the report.
Okay, so are there any other questions? So with that amendment that you have already agreed that you will change, with that small change, do we have a seconder for this? Is anyone seconding this report?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so is this recommendation in the report approved?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very slow in coming forward, I have to say, but never mind. Yes, thank you, Councillor Walsh. We're moving on to agenda item 9. This is the annual report of the Governance Committee for 2019-20 and will be introduced by Councillor Helen Ayres. Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in June, the Governance Committee agreed its annual report, which is being recommended for approval for publication by full council this evening. The report takes you through a number of sections, including the background of the committee's work, our activity for 2019 to 2020, and the work we've undertaken as part of the standards regime, considering complaints against city and parish councillors. Throughout the previous year, the committee has addressed a number of topics, including a polling district review, as well as changes to the constitution. I'm happy to answer any questions on the report and then recommend that the council approves this annual report for publication.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I can't see anything coming up. Just double check again. No, I think we're okay on that. So is there a seconder for this?
Seconded.
Thank you. Is the recommendation in the report approved?
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So we're moving on to agenda item 10, annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for 2019-20. Councillor John Galley will take us through this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everybody. As in previous years, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee have produced the annual report, which full council are asked to approve for publication. The annual report covers the statutory provisions that the committee works under, its terms of reference, and the previous and current membership. The report also details the work undertaken in 2019-20, which included updates from cabinet members and performance reviews of individual service areas. Unfortunately, like with most things, due to COVID-19, the committee has had to move some of these reviews into 2021, and these will be looked at future meetings. So it's a very, very short report, actually, because we didn't do half as much as we would have liked to given normal circumstances. But I'm happy to answer any questions and then recommend that the council approves this annual report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Have you a seconder for the report?
Seconded.
Thank you. Is the recommendation of the report approved?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on now, agenda item 11. So the next report is on a couple of changes to the membership of the Planning Committee. Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, I move the recommendation as in the report, which is a swap between Councillor Frascona and Councillor Davison as a member and substitute member of the Planning Committee. I so move.
Would you just verify which Councillor Davidson you are talking about, please?
Yeah, as I said, as tabled, as written in the report, Councillor Anne Davison and Councillor Julia Frascona to swap.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for this?
Seconded.
Thank you. So are the recommendations as amended by the changes to the membership of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee approved?
Oh, sorry, I hadn't moved that bit. I thought you were going to take that as a separate item.
Sorry, I'm just doing it all together. Carry on.
Can I just then move that bit as well? Yes. Councillor Bracken has done a fantastic job as Cabinet Deputy for the Economy and Small Business, but he's recently become a granddad and he'd like to travel to America to see the family and so he has decided to step down from the role as Cabinet Deputy for the Economy. As I say, I want to thank him for everything that he's done, particularly in the recent months, helping businesses to get back on track with the coronavirus crisis, and working with Councillor Davison on the grant scheme. So I'd like to thank Councillor Bracken and report to Council that I have nominated Councillor Simon Goldman as Cabinet Deputy for the Economy and Small Business. As a consequence, he cannot serve anymore on overview and scrutiny, so I'm nominating instead Councillor Bracken and Councillor Shaw to replace Councillor Dudley on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So that was the additional paper which was sent round. So I hope that you'll agree all of those changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we do have it seconded. Yes. Okay. Are the recommendations as amended by the changes to the membership of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee approved?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yes. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 12, which is the notice of motion at this meeting. It's on what the council can do in taking a stand against racism and discrimination, and will be moved by Councillor Lee Ashley and seconded by Councillor Stephen Robinson. Councillor Ashley, please. We may be having some technical issues. Councillor Ashley? Can we just check that Councillor Ashley is still actually on the meeting? Yes, Councillor Ashley, you are muted. If you'd like to unmute your microphone and then we can hear you. Thank you. This isn't going too well, is it? Okay, I'm going to do a final call for Councillor Lee Ashley to come on forward, please. Oh, was that a flicker there? No. Ah, Councillor.
Finally. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, I just want to point out we can just about see your eyebrows and nothing else. Okay. So if you'd like to sit a little bit further back from your screen, that might be helpful, and tilt it so that we can see your lovely face. Thank you.
Is that better?
Well, we can still just see your eyes, but that's better than we had.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm moving the motion as tabled. However, after a suggestion from the other councillors, I would like to change the wording on H to say the City Council welcomes the initiative by the Council to continue focus groups and meetings so that we can find out more about how we support our diverse communities and what they expect from us. Also, this council aims to improve its knowledge and understanding by using our museums, theatres, festivals and outside events to showcase the diversity of our city. This council will also report back regularly to all councillors with its findings. And I move for the motion to be passed as tabled.
Thank you. So, Councillor Robinson, do you wish to speak now or later?
Thank you. Yes, I am seconding the motion, but I will speak and sum up at the same time at the end of the main debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I have got two people that have indicated they wish to speak. The first was Councillor Massey. You wish to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to speak on the amendment which I believe the Conservative group is going to put.
And I wasn't aware of that. So who is tabling the amendment, and has it been circulated? Thank you. Councillor Whitehead?
Yes.
Sorry, you've frozen.
Evening. The leader of the council and I have been in correspondence throughout the day on this because we had hoped that he would accept the new wording that we have put forward, which is in essence much the same as Councillor Ashley wanted to go, but to go much further. He has declined to do so, which is a great shame. And so I have put forward an amendment which Councillor Clark will second, and which therefore we need to discuss, as Councillor Massey rightly says. So if you'll allow me, then I will talk on the amendment, but you probably need to put it up on screen first, Mr. Mayfield, do you?
I was going to say, we haven't seen the amendment, so if we can display the amendment, that would be helpful. Is Councillor Mayfield, is Mr. Mayfield able to display the amendment?
If you just bear with me, Madam Mayor, I'll try to bring it up on screen.
Thank you. Perhaps, Councillor Whitehead, you could put your hand down while we're waiting. Thank you.
I'm afraid, Madam Mayor, I'm having no luck bringing it up on the screen. Sorry, I will keep trying, but perhaps Councillor Whitehead could speak to it whilst I try to
read it out, please, Councillor Whitehead. That would be helpful while we're waiting.
Okay, you'll realise it's a bit long, but there we are. It is not, as I say, in essence, a lot different. So what we propose is that an amendment, let me get this in front of me, in the following terms be put to Council, which endorses the aims of the original motion, but widens its scope to encompass all religious and racial discrimination. So many of the points are the same. Let me read them out again, though. Chelmsford City Council acknowledges the recent protests concerning Black Lives Matter, and these do not represent isolated incidents. 2, notes that race hate recorded crime nationally has more than doubled in 6 years, from 35,845 to 78,991 in 2018-19. In Essex in 2018-19, a total of 2,846 hate crime offences were reported. 3, believes that this indicates that discrimination exists across society, including in Chelmsford, and the City Council should take further action to reduce and eliminate it. 4, acknowledges the need to challenge ourselves as individuals and in our own organisation about the dangers of unconscious bias. 5, notes that this council previously adopted a motion to stand against anti-Semitism. 6, acknowledges the work already done to ensure that Chelmsford welcomes the fact that it is becoming a more diverse city and values the contribution that BAME residents bring to us. We therefore resolve the following. Confirm the establishment of the Meeting of Minds group, which is the point that was made earlier on by Councillor Robinson, inviting key members of the BAME community to discuss openly incidents and experiences of racial and religious discrimination from first-hand experiences. I'm nearly finished. Continue focus groups and meetings so that we can find out more about how we support our diverse communities and what they expect from us as councillors and the City Council as a whole. 3, improve knowledge and understanding by using our museums, theatres, festivals and outside events to showcase the diversity of our city. 4, monitor the figures relating to hate crimes and actions taken via the Community Safety Partnership. 5, support the work of the Working Group on Connectivity and Local Democracy to tackle discrimination, encourage participation, and open up community discussion. It is an appropriate forum for challenging our approach to all areas of potential discrimination, beginning with the role we can play in tackling racism and religious discrimination. And finally, set up a new working group comprising the leaders or their nominated representative of the 3 political groups to establish how the results of these measures will be monitored and to report back regularly to all councillors. Now, I'm glad it's got onto the screen. As you will see, it is not a great deal different to the other one, but it does have some changes to it, and I'd like, therefore, to speak to those, Madam Mayor.
Okay, that's fine. So the process is we will debate the amendment. We will vote on the amendment before we vote on the motion. So debate the motion, obviously. So if you would like to go ahead and speak to your amendment.
Thank you indeed. Yeah. Now, as I say,
sorry, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, can we have a seconder to that proposed amendment, please?
Yes, of course. And who is seconding this amendment?
I'm seconding the amendment, Mayor.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Do you wish to speak immediately after Councillor Whitehead or at the end?
I do, but it's going to be brief because I'm not going to repeat everything Councillor Whitehead says, but I'm in agreement with it.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Right, okay. Now, our concern mostly was that some of the statements in the resolution are somewhat ill-defined, and it is very difficult because a lot of it needs statistical evidence that isn't easily available. And so the one thing that did puzzle us slightly was that we were proposing to do things that we're already doing. And indeed, in Councillor Robinson's latest response to me, he rightly says, Chelmsford City Council has always in the past set out to be against discrimination generally and racism specifically, and has policies to that effect. Given we have policies, why do we need a resolution to go through now when we've already got policies? And so that's a particular point that we were raising in the main. Now, it also sort of indicates that the previous administration, I'm not being political, but previous administrations, therefore, hadn't worked on this, and that's certainly not true. So we set up the police hub, for example, at the Civic Centre to work even more closely with the police so that these various items can be discussed, and it's working very, very well. Now, one thing that I have left out, and it is to adopt the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia. Now, the reason that we've raised this is that it highlights Islamophobia, but doesn't mention all the other particular religions that there are, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the others, really. And if we are tackling this, then we need to encompass those as well. So that's why we have said all forms of racism and religious problems. In fact, that definition wasn't adopted by government. It was rejected by the Home Secretary. And the chair of the National Police Officers Council said it could cause confusion amongst officers and hamper the fight against terrorism. So it's a dangerous thing. It was one of these groups of people that put it. It was discussed in the Houses of Parliament, and the resolution was that this House has has considered the definition of Islamophobia. Now, clearly it exists, and I'm not denying that for a second, but what we're trying to do with our amended one is to say we need you, the administration, to accept that there are more things that we should be putting into this original proposal to make it wider. Otherwise, we are sort of narrowing it down. It's accepted that we had the one rightly against anti-Semitism. It's right that we should have one against Islamophobia. I'm not saying it's not, but we should have an encompassing one that covers all religions and all races, really. And that's why we have said we don't accept the one that you're putting forward and that we've asked that you amend it. Now, I don't want to, as I say, do other than to welcome the idea that this goes forward. But if it is not straightforward, it's difficult. The other point I think that was in your original one was it notes the government's finding about the impact of COVID-19 on Black, Asian and ethnic minority people. Now, the reason for this are very complex. I read about them in the press every day, really, and we've seen all sorts of reasons being put forward. And I think we need to accept that there's more work to be done. So we note the government's finding it has a disproportionate impact is correct, but we need to add to that that we need further to examine the subsequent research, because as we've seen, there have been hotspots around, and the government is carefully looking at all of those things. So I think, you know, to not carry this forward further, we welcome the idea that we should go forward. I did suggest to Councillor Robinson that he withdraw, or Councillor Ashley, sorry, withdraw the current one and accept our one. Ideally, that we come back later on in the year when some of these points are clarified, so that we can put forward a much stronger resolution to Council that covers all forms of racism, religious intolerance. I mean, as you know, I'm looking desperately now for my quote, but there are a number of items. Here we are. Under the Equality Act, the characteristics are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. So shouldn't we, or perhaps we already have, as Councillor Robinson was trying to say, got policies on these, and shouldn't all of them be included in this motion, not individual ones that have been picked out, because we need to be much wider in our views. We don't want to produce a racist motion. What we want to do is produce an inclusive motion. So I ask that Council accept the amendments, the amended resolution that we've been put forward, and that we all work together, the three leaders work together, to enhance and improve the situation over the months ahead. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Massey, you've had your hand up for this for a long time. Would you like to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, members. I'm disappointed that this motion only focuses on a couple of the protected characteristics as defined in the Equality Act 2010 and as described by Councillor Whitehead. It's a worthy motion, but even with Councillor Ashley's last-minute addition, I don't believe it goes far enough. This amendment would confirm the City Council's commitment to fight discrimination. This amendment would confirm the City Council's commitment to fight discrimination against all 9 protected characteristics within the 2010 Act. My concern is that we will receive amendments to this policy as and when discrimination against other protected characteristics are identified or raised in the public eye. With the best will in the world, it's naive to believe that no other forms of discrimination exist in our society. Surely it would be better for all residents if we get this right first time, in line with legislation that's been on the statute books for 10 years. I thus support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. We'll go to Councillor Marie Goldman, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak to the amendment, please. And I'm going to start off perhaps a little bit unusually by telling you about some things that have never happened to me. My religion, or lack of it as it turns out, has never been accused of spreading a disease. At school, my children have never been told that their sort are usually cleverer than that. I have never been stopped by the police, ever, regardless of the type of car I have been driving or the time of day or night I have been driving it. And when I have stood for election, my photograph has never been whitened to make my skin colour theoretically more appealing to voters. I personally have never had to deal with any of the above, and yet at least some of these things have happened to people living right here in Chelmsford on our watch. I don't think that's good enough, and I think we need to do something about it right now. The members of the opposition groups have put forward an amendment that they suggest is more ambitious than the motion before the council this evening. Their amendment, which is essentially a wrecking amendment, wants us to encompass all forms of discrimination. It sounds like a noble aim, doesn't it? Eliminating all forms of discrimination. But for the benefit of those who do not have a copy of the amendment in front of you, and I received a copy earlier, I note the explicit emphasis on the word all, which on my copy has been written in bold. To me, this is strangely reminiscent of those who have tried to undermine the Black Lives Matter protest by saying that all lives matter. Of course, they're right. All lives do indeed matter, but I'm afraid that completely misses the point. I've seen various analogies employed to explain this, but perhaps one of the simplest is imagining a street full of houses. At the far end of the street, a house is on fire. Running down the street is the owner of that house, shouting, "My house is on fire, help me pour water on it." In this scenario, I now ask you to imagine the reaction of the owners of the other houses on the street. What would they say? What would they do? Would they grab a hose and help dampen down the flames on the burning house? Or would they first say, "But what about my house? My house matters too"? I don't know about you, but I like to think that I would recognise the urgency of needing to fight the fire first. That doesn't mean I wouldn't care about my own house or the houses of everyone else on the street. It's just that at that particular moment in time, the house on fire needs more immediate attention. And that's the point. Yes, all lives matter. And yes, all forms of racism, inequality and discrimination need to be tackled. But we need to recognise that we don't have unlimited resources, and we must recognise the urgency of the situation before us. The amendment put forward by the opposition groups doesn't recognise any urgency. It kicks the can down the road. And the strange thing is, passing the motion, unamended, this evening, won't stop us from committing to tackling all forms of discrimination in the future. It doesn't preclude us from taking any other action, but it does commit us right here and right now to recognising the urgency of the issues we already know about and acting with urgency. To my mind, the amendment says, we recognise there's a problem, but it isn't important enough to do anything about it right now. I think that's unacceptable. Our residents' houses are on fire. Let's work together to put the fire out. So, respectfully, I ask members to reject the amendment and to vote for the motion in its original form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldburn. Councillor Wright, please. Councillor Ian Wright, you're next on my list.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Though I fully agree with the contents of the original motion, I cannot support it, nor could I vote against it, because there are some very, very real issues there that this council needs to consider. But when you listen to what has been said, and I'm not referring to the last speaker because I found that far too political, what we're really concerned about is caring for our citizens. And that means, like it or not, all citizens. And this subject has got to be fully explored. All councillors need an opportunity to have an input. This is one of the most, and will be for years to come, one of the most serious matters that we will consider. Let's get it right, as it's already been suggested, and let's all sit down together. This isn't a political matter. This is for humanity, and we all care. And if you go back, many of you will remember, to when I was the mayor, I instigated, together with the Essex Chronicle and others, a day called One World Chelmsford, which brought all nationalities, all religious groups, pagans, Jewish people, everybody came together to celebrate this wonderful town of ours. Now, that in itself shows how much I do care, and I have every respect for the councillor who made the original motion. But let's get together, let's get it right. Let's have one of the best places for people of all nationalities and religions to actually be proud to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Robinson.
Right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, now this is dealing with the amendment, and we will return to the main motion once we've dispensed with the amendment. So this is on the amendment. Yes, Councillor, I'd like to make two broad points and a number of sub-points. I want to address the process of the amendment and the motion and the substance. And on the process, yes, I received an email late, about 24 hours ago, from Councillor Whitehead proposing a very short, effectively what might be described as a wrecking amendment, as a delete all and insert with a few words remaining. And I said that wasn't good enough, you know, because there's a proper debate that needs to be had now, so I encouraged him to submit a revised amendment, so that we could consider it. His revised amendment, if I wanted to be very procedural about it, I would be moving now that his amendment is not a competent amendment, because it doesn't actually amend the motion. It's effectively a delete all and insert, and it doesn't set out which bits it has deleted. And as Councillor Goldman was alluding to, there are a number of quite significant parts of the original main motion that Councillor Whitehead's amendment just completely ignores and removes. So I want to reiterate the points I made earlier. Of course, it would be preferable if we could move on a subject like this, or indeed any subject, by consensus. But that does require a degree of cooperation and discussion and dialogue earlier rather than later. And Councillor Whitehead only sent me his revised amendment late this afternoon. So I'm willing to listen, and always willing, and have shown that, I think, on other council meetings to date, that we are willing to take sensible suggestions from the opposition groups. But as I say, it's a badly formed amendment, delivered late. And as Councillor Goldman said, it just proposes delay, delay and delay. And like on climate action, Councillor Whitehead seems to think we can wait and wait and wait for action. And the whole substance, and I have to say, Councillor Massey's comments on the amendments is a massive missing of the point. The point, the reason this motion is tabled now is because of the recent incidents that we have seen, when it has been quite clear that black people in our society around the world are being treated differently from the rest of society. And that's not right, because yes, all lives matter, but it's black lives that are not mattering at the moment to some people, and we should say something about it. And Councillor Whitehead is correct. Yes, the council has policies, but my point was, and I made this point to him earlier, that it's not good enough to have policy, you need to have action. And the motion that we tabled proposes actions. And I welcome Councillor Wright's comments a moment ago, but the fact that he convened that meeting some years ago and we still need things to change, and things still haven't changed, just serves to underline the issue and the fact that we need action and that words are not good enough. So, and this motion, the motion that we tabled, is principally about the subject of discrimination on grounds of race. We previously covered a motion on anti-Semitism, and we thought it appropriate to mention Islamophobia as well, so that we couldn't be accused of only focusing on one religion. I think it's widely accepted that the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith are two which have been particularly singled out for criticism and attack and worse. So, as I say, it's a badly formed amendment. It cuts out too many things. It pushes everything off to another day. And I would urge that all of these issues, if there are other issues to be considered, and let's get members around the table in the working group that we already have. Let's not set up another working group. And I certainly don't think it should just be the 3 leaders. So I'm so little surprised at the lack of inclusivity from Councillor Whitehead's amendment. We have a cross-party working group to consider these issues. And so for all of these reasons, it's a badly formed amendment, it's bad process, and it's bad content. I would urge the council to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Now I've got Councillor Rajesh. I'm not sure if you wish to speak to the amendment or to the motion. If you could indicate in the chat box which it is, please. And I'm now going to call Councillor Sisme, and at the end of this, I will call Paul Clark, Councillor Paul Clark. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I wanted to, I'm supporting the amendment because I think the original motion is a flawed motion in that it's exclusive. We don't eliminate discrimination by promoting discrimination in favour of certain parts of the population. We should promote that we oppose discrimination against any part of the population. All Chelmsford residents should be considered fairly on their merits and regardless of any aspect of their sex, age, religion or race. And so that's why I think this is a flawed motion, and that's why I support the amendment.
Thank you. I will go to Councillor Rajesh, as she's said she wishes to speak to the amendment, and then after that we'll go to Councillor Paul Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a person of colour and as someone who has experienced racism in this city, along with many other within the community, I would like to reject the amendment, as I feel that it is an urgent need for us to pass the original motion as soon as possible. I fully support the anti-racism motion, and I believe that Chelmsford City will be a trailblazer with this motion and will soon become diverse and inclusive in the true sense of the word. And I must say that I'm very proud to be part of this council driving this change, if we do that tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Rajesh. And Councillor Paul Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a lot of what I was going to say has already been said by Councillor Whitehead, so I don't need to go over that. On a couple of points, it would have been useful to have the statistics in item B for Chelmsford alone. Yes, we know it's a countrywide issue, and no doubt that's reflected in the county. But we are talking about Chelmsford as a council, and the data is attainable because I've seen figures for 2019, 2020 for Malden and Chelmsford. The other points I wanted to make were that I'm not voting against the principle, but I have to say we do have policies, and policies are action in response to what Councillor Robinson was suggesting. This isn't a wrecking process, and anyone who knows my family history could hardly say I'm a racist if I voted against this motion. But in its current form, I can't support it because it doesn't go far enough, not because it's not relevant to how I believe. So I will be supporting, I second the amendment. That's it really, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, as you propose this amendment, would you like to have a final word?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm slightly puzzled by Councillor Robinson's comments, really. He and I spoke on the telephone previous on this matter. He was very, very busy, and indeed he's procedure.
Yes, sorry. Is someone calling point of procedure?
Yes, it's me. It's Councillor Jones. Could I just draw your attention to 4.1.13.16, which indicates that the councillor who moved an amendment shall have no right of reply during the debate of the amendment.
Okay, I thank you for that, Councillor Jones. My apologies to Councillor Whitehead. I was not aware of that particular section, so my apologies. We will move on to the vote on the amendment. I think we're going to go over now to Mr. Whitehead. Sorry, Mr. Mayfield.
You can, but I don't recommend it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll read out everybody's name in alphabetical order. If you could indicate whether you're for or against the amendment or wish to abstain. So beginning with Councillor Amble.
For.
Councillor Ashley.
Against.
Councillor Ayres.
Against.
Councillor Bentley.
Abstain.
Councillor Bracken.
Against.
Councillor Dan Clark.
Against.
Councillor Paul Clark.
For.
Councillor Dayden.
Abstain.
Councillor Anne Davidson.
Against.
Councillor Chris Davidson.
Against.
Yourself, Councillor Deakin.
I'm abstaining, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dobson.
For.
Councillor Dudley.
Against.
Councillor Frascona.
Against.
Councillor Fuller.
Against.
Councillor Galley.
For.
Councillor Marie Goldman.
Against.
Councillor Simon Goldman.
Against.
Councillor Grundy.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Highland.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Knight.
Councillor Knight has indicated a vote in the chat box.
All right, okay. Thank you. Councillor Lager.
Against.
Councillor Large.
Against.
Councillor Lee.
Against.
Councillor McCrory.
Against.
Councillor Mascott.
Against.
Councillor Massey.
For.
Councillor Mullane.
For.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Pooley.
Against.
Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter. No, I'll come back to Councillor Potter. Councillor Poulter.
For.
Councillor Rudley. Councillor Raven.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
For. Did you get?
Sir, I didn't catch that, Councillor Roberts.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Sampson.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
Against.
Councillor Shepherd.
For.
Councillor Sismy. Councillor Sismy.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Sozin.
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Sozin.
Against.
Councillor Steele.
For.
Councillor Tron.
Against.
Councillor Walsh.
Against.
Councillor Whitehead.
Or.
Councillor Willis.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
For.
And Councillor Young.
Against.
Thank you. That completes the vote. Without totting up all the figures, Madam Mayor, there is a clear majority against the amendment. I could give you the figures if you wanted me to do so, but on the face of it, the amendment is lost.
Thank you. I have Councillor Roper has put his hand up. Councillor Roper, did you want to respond to the vote?
Madam Mayor, Councillor Wright, could I just say one thing? The last planning meeting, Councillor could not be heard, and I had to get him to put up a note which way he was voting. So he may be suffering the same problem. Thank you.
Yes. Councillor Roper, I think, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Is that correct? Okay. Oh, right. You're voting for the amendment. Thank you. We got that. That will be recorded, Mr. Mayfield. If you'd like to...
Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roper, could you put your hand down, please? Otherwise, I think you're going to want to speak again. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Mayfield, do you have the figures now for us?
I do, Madam Mayor. There were 29 in favour, sorry, against the amendment, 19 in favour of it, and 3 abstentions. So the motion was not carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with the amendment having been defeated, we now go on to speak to the substantive motion. Councillor Ashley, would you like to come back in and talk about your motion? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I would recommend to this council that this motion is passed tonight, please.
You don't wish to add anything further?
I appreciate the comments by Councillor Wright, and I appreciate the Councillor Whitehead's contribution. Just the fact that I didn't include other religions like Hinduism, Buddhism. I think there's so many religions that you could include, and I'd just like it noted that all lives matter.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Does anyone else wish to speak on the motion as it was tabled? Councillor Pooley, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I seem to have typed ill in the box rather than an H to begin with, but I'm not unwell enough to speak. So thank you for calling me. I just wanted to comment that it is strange, isn't it, how we get our knickers in a twist when we try to be too clever in formulating motions and amending motions, because I don't think many of us think that the motivations of those proposing that amendment were out of order. I think that the motion itself says what, in so many respects, what it needs to say, particularly in what the motion is resolving that we as a council should do. Leaving aside the all-party parliamentary group definition of Muslimism for 1 minute, just looking at the other aspects of the resolution, the recommended resolution, they are all totally inclusive of all forms of discrimination. And they reflect very clearly the debate that I was pleased to listen in on of the Local Democracy Working Party the other day, which was a very extensive debate and a very lengthy agenda item, which the local agenda that the Local Democracy Working Party went through, where again there was massive concern from all sides to underline the fact that what we're looking to be as a council is genuinely inclusive of all areas of our community and various aspects of exclusion, the risks of exclusion, and various forms of discrimination that do clearly arise in areas other than race and religion as well. So let's not let this debate detract from the underlying level of agreement that there is, that we're looking to promote and protect and enhance the diversity of our community and the sense of engagement and inclusion that we want all of our citizens to have, regardless of race or religion or other forms of minority, other forms of minority. So, from my point of view, I would procedurally, I would really have welcomed not only the being able to look at the amendments, because I couldn't see it on the screen that I'm working on, but looking also at Councillor Ashley's proposed change to agenda item, to item H, which is not part of the resolution, but is part of something that we're meant to welcome. So that I think that Councillor Ashley was implying that that broadens it a little in the direction that the amenders would have liked. But putting that to one side, I'd be interested to hear others' comments on the merits or otherwise of adopting the British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia. But putting that to one side, and I'm sure, having listened to those comments, I will remain thoroughly in favour of the motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyland, do you wish to come in?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just looking at the original motion, 12H, I think Councillor Whitehead referred to this in his entry, in that it looks like it's a retrospective motion because we're dealing with it already. Meeting of Minds is already dealing with it, with racial discrimination, and Councillor Pooley just again reiterated that the Connectivity and Local Democracy Working Group, the agenda that we've just gone through, is dealing with it. So I see this motion as retrospective. We're doing it already, which is a great thing, right? I mean, I think it's really important that we do continue to do it. So I don't see what weight this brings to the action we're already taking. And in item 12D of the resolution, so D of the resolution, Councillor Ashley, you suggest that we are going to monitor the hate crimes. My expectation would be that we would see the baseline figures that you have for us to make any adjustments to monitoring those hate crime figures. So do you have the baseline figures that you're working with for Chelmsford?
The officers have these figures. I know from Spencer Clark, the officer, that the figures are available. And can I also point out, as a member, trustee, Citizens Advice, I'm a trustee, they also have figures. So you can check with them as well. The figures from Citizens Advice, Chelmsford Citizens Advice, and officers will also give you those figures if you want them.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Through you, Chair, again, apologies. So the figures that you should be looking for and should be in this paper is in Chelmsford, in the last 12 months, there were 314 hate crimes. 189 of them were racial. And there were, sorry, I beg your pardon, 189 of them were racial, and the victims were white Northern Europeans. So the figures actually demonstrate the size of the issue. And I think we should be very clinical in where our baseline is and where our aspirations are in any motion that we carry forward in Chelmsford. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, can I reply to that, please?
Yes, please.
Councillor Hyland, you and myself, I believe, are on the working party group in democracy. So if that's a point you want to make about Eastern Europeans also who are white facing discrimination, then that's something we can do. As you've pointed it out tonight, I'll make a note of it. And if you make a note of it, we can come up with that in the working group.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Anyone else want to come in on this? Okay, we've got Councillor Rajesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention what Councillor Hyland just mentioned, that it is Eastern European, but I know for a fact that the BAME community doesn't feel quite comfortable coming either to the Citizen Advice Bureau or going to the police to report the hate crimes that they suffer. It is the motion really is it's basically a positive step towards giving them that that support that they need to project the positive image that they are also welcome to come and get help from the council, from the police, and from Citizen Advice Bureau and any other such organization.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Right, if I can get to the sort of summing up stage, I mean, clearly from Councillor Hyland's point of view, I entirely agree with him. It is the lack of figures. And in fact, if we go back, I'm not going back on the subject, but the one thing I did put as an addition was that we establish how the results of these measures will be monitored. And I think that's the key point that he makes, and I would support entirely, is that if we don't know how many cases there are, and he's given us facts this evening which are completely new to me, then we're being in a difficult situation. But these groups that you've set up are ones in which we need to see figures brought to them, I think, really, because otherwise we'll get full of good intentions, but none of actual action. And whilst I would dispute that our amended resolution didn't have any actions in it as such, I think the working groups that you have set up are ones which are the forum to be used to bring those sorts of figures. As I say, it's fascinating, the situation regarding different groups that we haven't even thought of this evening. It is one that we should know more about, really. So I'm sorry that we won't support it as such, what you're doing, because we believe it doesn't go far enough. But we welcome the fact that you've gone so far already, and hope that we can come back to this subject in the future with an expanded motion or an expanded policy of this council, which we'll be able to fully support at that time. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ashley, for putting it forward in the first place.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, before I go to Councillor Robinson to second this, is there anything else you would like to add?
Just to reply to Councillor Whitehead, I thoroughly agree that something as important as racism shouldn't be a party political, it shouldn't have any party political agenda attached to it. And I'd be the first one to agree with that. So the Working Party will have a cross-section of your party, my party, and independents. And it will be down to us to come back with the fact-finding that we're expected to report back, and we will report back to the council and extend it further, because you seem to think that we haven't covered everything. And in that case, if you pointed out where you think there's a shortfall or we haven't explored enough, then it's up to us to do that. So I have made a note of that.
Yes,
thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Can we go to Councillor Robinson to second the motion?
And thank you, Madam Mayor, to second and to sum up this debate, hopefully. So can I do the sort of some of the follow-up? I'd say thank you to what Councillor Hyland said, but I would say that that's the way the motion is structured is precisely in two sections. The first section, A to I, does indeed note, welcomes and so on, things that are already happening. And then the second section is resolved too. So it's a question of putting on the record what we are already doing and also proposing some actions for what we should be doing. What I would like to do is to clarify what Councillor Ashley referred to H. What Councillor Ashley and I would like to do is a drafting amendment in paragraph H. We just wanted to remove the words the mayor. Sorry, no, not the mayor. Mayor and. We want to remove the words mayor and, so that it welcomes the initiative of the council leadership to establish the meeting of many minds group. Councillor Whitehead was concerned that we should make it clear, and he raised this question previously, he wanted it to make it clear that this group was established by the leadership of the council and that it's simply chaired by the mayor. So I'm proposing a drafting amendment to our own motion just to remove mayor and H. So we note the things that we are doing, and then we propose some actions. And yes, we should indeed be careful about the figures that we're using. Councillor Hyland mentioned some, and that's why we should monitor them. Absolutely, we should monitor the figures. We should look at them in detail at the working group that has already been established, and that's where we should look at it. As we said earlier on the amendment, I think Councillor Whitehead keeps saying it doesn't go far enough. I mean, that's a smokescreen, and I'm really rather disappointed that it's actually an attempt to divert attention from the big issue. The point of this motion and the point of public outrage over the last couple of months is because Black lives matter, but they don't seem to be. That Black people in particular around the world are being treated as second-class citizens. And if you're in any doubt about that, look at some of the figures. They are, let's look at some of the figures. Black, Asian and minority ethnic people are 54% more likely than white people to be fined under the new coronavirus lockdown laws. That's in recent figures from the Police Chiefs Council. That's really up to date. We're talking about in the last 4 months, BME people are more likely to be 54% more likely than white people. In the United Kingdom, 26% of instances of the police using firearms are against Black people, despite Black people making up only 3% of the population. 51% of young men in custody in the UK are for BME backgrounds, despite these groups making only 14% of the population.
Excuse me, Councillor Robinson, we have Councillor Hyland has come in with a point of order.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Councillor Robinson is using figures that are not Chelmsford related. Can we have the Chelmsford related figures? Thank you. Point of order.
Back to you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a point of order, because I mean, any member is entitled to refer to any evidence they want when in support of their argument. I think the point is, and the reason for looking at the general figures, I mean, the focus on Chelmsford and the need for Councillor Hyland wants figures for Chelmsford suggests that maybe he thinks it's not a problem in Chelmsford and it's other people, other parts, other places that have a problem. And I think that if we've learned nothing over the last, we should have learned that this is a problem that affects everybody, and we should no longer turn a blind eye to it. And I think the voices that we heard from Chelmsford residents, I mean, if Councillor Hyland wants a specific reference, we had about 8 or 10 different residents of Chelmsford from the BAME community at the Meeting of Many Minds group. And we had a resident of Chelmsford who went to school at Chelmsford County High School and then Molsham High School, who told us in some detail about how she'd been bullied, called names for the colour of her skin. So, that is a Chelmsford example. And Councillor Rajesh has just spoken of her own experience in Chelmsford. Racism in all its forms is a serious and unseen problem, and even though the ethnic minority population is under 10% in Chelmsford, it's just as true here as in other areas with greater diversity. And although progress has been made, work to eradicate it is far from complete. It's not enough to have policy, we need to have action. And the council, as the elected leadership of the district, has a responsibility to lead that work. And that's why I think we should support this motion. Thank you very much. And I don't know if you want 10 people specifically to say, but I'm aware of at least 10 members of the council who would like this vote to be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. If those 10 members would like to indicate in the chat box that they want a recorded vote by putting the letter R, that would be very helpful to me. Thank you. In the meantime, we're going to, oh, they're coming in fast and furious. Okay. Thank you. I think we've satisfied the requirement for 10. Okay. So we are now going to vote on the motion. Sorry, did you need to say something? Councillor Galley, did you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
You've just come up on my screen. If you could switch the camera, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so now obviously the motion is draft amendment is what we're going to vote on. We've been asked for a recorded vote. We have the 10 plus members requested to do so. So I'm going to ask for make please do a roll. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As before, I'll read out everybody's name in alphabetical order. If you could indicate whether you're for or against the motion or wish to abstain. So beginning with Councillor Ambor again.
Abstain.
Councillor Ashley.
For.
Councillor Ayres.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bracken.
For.
Councillor Chambers. I'll come back to Councillor Chambers. Councillor Dan Clark.
For.
Councillor Paul Clark.
I wish to abstain, thank you.
Councillor Dayton.
Abstain.
Councillor Anne Davidson.
For.
Councillor Chris Davidson.
For.
Yourself, Madam Mayor.
Abstain.
Councillor Dobson.
Abstain.
Councillor Dudley.
For.
Councillor Frascona.
For.
Councillor Fuller.
For.
Councillor Galley.
Abstain.
Councillor Marie Goldman.
For.
Councillor Simon Goldman.
For.
Councillor Grundy.
Abstain.
Councillor Hughes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hyland.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Knight.
In the chat box, he says abstain.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lager.
For.
Councillor Large.
For.
Councillor Lee.
For.
Councillor McCrory.
For.
Councillor Mascott.
For.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor Millane.
Abstain.
Councillor Moore.
For.
Councillor Pooley.
For.
Councillor Potter. Come back to Councillor Potter. Councillor Poulter.
Abstain.
Councillor Rajesh.
For.
Councillor Raven.
Abstain.
Councillor Roberts.
Abstain.
Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Roper. If he's showing anything on screen. So, Councillor Sampson.
For.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Shepherd.
Abstain.
Councillor Sisme. Councillor Sisme.
Sorry, my clicker is a bit delayed. Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Sozin.
4.
Councillor Janetta Sozin.
4.
Councillor Steele.
Abstain.
Councillor Tron.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Whitehead.
Abstain.
Councillor Willis.
4.
Councillor Wright.
Abstain.
And Councillor Young.
4.
Just going back to Councillor Chambers. And Councillor Potter.
Councillor Potter has a hand up.
Yes, Councillor Potter. How do you wish to vote? I'm afraid we can't see you or hear you. Could you put it in the chat box how you wish to vote? That will help. Abstain. Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Right, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just tot up the figures.
Thank you.
Right, Madam Mayor, there were 30 in favour of the motion and 22 against, and therefore the motion is carried. Thank you.
Were there actually votes against or were they?
Sorry, my apologies, abstained rather than against.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, well, that seems to conclude this evening's business, and I thank you for your attendance and your forbearance, because we've had a few little hitches here and there, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
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 Thank you. Good night.
Good evening.
Good night.